Hello, good evening. Welcome. Sorry, my throat's full. How's everybody? You'll be better in a few, trust me. So, good evening. My name is Ken Grout. Welcome to the Spring 2023 Southwick Recital, Emerson's longest running tradition of oral communication. So it's a real pleasure to have you all here, much appreciated. I want to say a few thank yous before we start. The interim, now full dean of the School of Communication, Brent Smith, and his team, we always appreciate their help and support. To Kevin Mercury, a friend of the Com Studies Department, and to Jane Pierre-Saulnier, the associate chair, thank you, I knew I was wrong, associate chair of the Com Studies Department, but most especially to Dr. Gregory Payne, the chair of the Com Studies Department and the person who is perhaps most responsible for all of us coming together to memorialize what happened 53 years ago. So thank you for the help and support. Now, I am a professor, so I will talk now. (1970). Even though it was a new decade on the calendar, it was at its heart a volatile extension of the 1960s. On May 4th at Kent State in Ohio, 4 students were killed and 9 others injured by National Guard's troops. 11 days later, on the campus of Jackson State in Mississippi, 2 students were killed and another dozen injured by police and the National Guard. We are here this evening using the power of communication through literature to remember and memorialize both the events themselves as well as the lives tragically lost. If you were alive at that time, as I was, you may remember what the world was like. But for many of you here in the theater, 1970 is ancient history. So I want you to consider that time through a few specific lenses. For most Americans then, life was lived in the belly of the civil rights movement, the burgeoning, as it was called then, women's rights movement, the inescapability of the Vietnam War, and the ever-widening generation gap between young people and their parents. You see, people who were 20 years old in 1970 were born in 1950. That's math, by the way. This is Emerson, but I did math. Now, this means that their parents were likely born during the 1920s. So think about it. Their parents were children who lived in the shadow and uncertainty of the Great Depression, and their parents experienced young adulthood swimming in the patriotic fervor that symbolized World War II. So now come back to 1970. When the Vietnam War happened, these parents, these Depression and World War survivors, expected their children, when called upon by their government to serve, to respond in the same way that they had. Didn't often happen. The expectations in many cases could not have been more misplaced. The military draft, you see, was in full throttle in 1970, so if you were male, once you turned 18, you were eligible for the draft and could essentially be called to serve at any time. And if you didn't want to serve, there were 2 legal responses that you could take. You could leave the country. Canada was a popular choice. Or you could become a full-time student at any college or university studying any subject. So what this second means of deferment did was 2 things. It created an us versus them dynamic between students and soldiers, and it meant that a disproportionately high percentage of those serving in the military were those who either could not afford or could not get accepted to college, meaning men of color, men of lower economic station, and men who had dropped out of high school. So there became not only a generation gap between generations, but a generation gap within a generation. And the divide didn't stop there. In the months leading up to the new decade, on July 20th, 1969, the absolute pinnacle of the establishment generation was reached when 3 Americans became the first human beings to set foot on the face of the moon. While a mere 3 weeks later, the counterculture reached its zenith when 500,000 strong swelled into the farmlands of upstate New York to experience a little music and craft fair, which would come to be known as Woodstock. Even at movie theaters in the spring of 1970, perhaps even those in Kent and Jackson, this division was on full display. 2 war films were being widely distributed, and both would go on to critical acclaim, financial success, cinematic immortality, and both were released mere weeks before the Kent and Jackson massacres. Yet, the mainstream nationalistic Patton and the irreverent, darkly comic MASH served further to illustrate and illuminate the growing divide as to how Americans defined patriotism and considered the severities of war. Tonight, we have a number of student poets, and we have selections from a play, and you can refer to your programs, but when listening to the poetry, when listening to the dramatic reading presented by some really wonderful Emerson students and friends, please remember the perspectives I've just shared, because everything you're going to hear was inspired by that framework. So again, welcome to the Southwick. We appreciate you being here. And our first poem tonight, unfortunately, the poet was unable to join us. It's entitled 13 Seconds Later, and the poet is Amy Goyette, but here presenting in Amy's stead, please welcome Cheyenne Kamenik.
Thank you. 13 seconds later. 13 seconds later, the story's told. Young minds, hot blood, but bodies grown cold. The sun high above, song circles below, blown away with a shot, blood of the doe. Soldiers on campus where knowledge is king. We've the right to ask, can freedom just ring? Meet bayonets with books and shields with flowers. Send children to war, force scholars to cower. Now history made in all the wrong ways, face down in the dirt for his final gaze. Merry as the month of May, there's seldom been a darker day. Make the right phone calls, close the casket door, and answer one question. How many more?
My youth in the final days of the empire. When the sturdy arm of empire extends, it wraps itself around the world and taps you on the back. At the brush of its fingertips, do you shudder and shriek, or relax into a sense of perfect justice? Minor revolutions pop and fizzle in the wake of mass death, soft prices to pay for the unpayable debt of Pax Americana. This is the cycle of empire. As violence gives birth to itself, no matter how far away one conceives it, it will give bloody birth in your bed and stain your sheets. It gets on the walls and drools hot spit on the carpets. You won't get the smell out. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. There is no right and wrong in the final days of empire, only cause and effect. One cannot move freely, unabashedly, through the jungle and not flood the Middle Western plains back home. There are prices one has to pay to live in the world of good men doing hard work, and that is where we live, in the land of hard men doing good work. But don't think about it for long. The blood will roll off your back, their naive screams flickering away like wind through chimes. Or maybe a softer hell awaits, if you give an eye, for an eye, for an eye, for an eye. In Vietnam, soldiers pushed villagers onto helicopters. Frantic mothers seemed to abandon their children to climb aboard. It is Vietnamese custom. Mothers must cross any threshold first to make sure it is safe for their children to follow. In Ohio, the children drop like bullets.
For I see you in front of me, but I feel you behind me. In my eyes you guard, but don't forget about the eyes I have in the back of my head. The only nerves I pinch are in my neck, where you slip your lies under my skin and tickle my spine. What is it you protect? Thank you.
Sonnet. Upon the verdant fields of youth and strife, in May's fair bloom, beneath the azure skies, two tragedies unfolded, felling life and casting shadows over students' cries. At Kent State first, where guardsmen stood their ground, 4 souls were silenced by the crack of guns. As echoes ceased, a somber truth was found. A nation's heartache had just begun. 4 souls at Kent were silenced by the gun. 2 more in Jackson's halls did breathe no more. Their dreams and hopes, like morning dew, undone. The nation's heart, now torn and bleeding sore. Through history's lens, we witness and we learn, lest tyranny and violence return.
Studying outside in spring, I've sat on that hill, among the dark green shoots of daffodil leaves, yellow petals bright, demanding to be seen, each tuft a fallen soldier. It's easy to forget. When my feet know each divot, each bump in the sidewalk, each tree root reaching out, Ohio is my home. And it was theirs too. Jeff, Bill, Allison, Sandy. Their names are written in chalk, somehow never fading. A rusted steel sculpture, a peace sign punctured on that May day in 1970. If you look close enough, the trees are scarred too. You forget, until you cut across a parking lot on a clear spring night and you're met with the glow, lamps guarding their somber post, where blood once soaked the pavement. For a moment, past and present intersect so violently you can smell the gunpowder, and you wonder, did he take the shortcut? Did her friends live in Verder? Did they study on that hill? Like us, they were kids. In these moments, that shallow mantra, never forget, holds true. But we always forget. We go back to cramming exams and pulling all-nighters and studying on that very hill, ignoring the past as it screams all around us, demanding to be remembered.
"53 years. Miller, Schuer, Schroeder, Krauss, and Mary Ann. Anti-war sentiment across the land. college kids immortalized, remember, the same age as you and me, by their bullet wounds on May 4th, 1970. Nixon's Cambodian genocide from 1965 to 1973. Fire rained down by the tons. By Kissinger's command, a country of innocent people, reduced to rubble, according to maps drawn by bloodied hands. Foreign policy's favorite war crimes, American crime in the form of American campaigns, a patriotic pastime of 53 years wasted. Of the past decades with nothing to show, tin soldiers and Nixon's coming, we're finally on our own. This summer I hear the drumming, 4 dead in Ohio.
Tin soldiers and Nixon's coming, we're finally on our own. This summer I hear the drumming, 4 dead in Ohio. Gotta get down to it, soldiers are gunning us down. Should have been done long ago. What if you knew her and found her dead on the ground? How can you run when you know? Tin soldiers and Nixon's coming, we're finally on our own. This summer I hear the drumming, 4 dead in Ohio. 4 dead in Ohio. 4 dead in Ohio. 4 dead in Ohio.
Anyone who appears in the streets of a city like Kent with long hair and dirty clothes or barefooted deserves to be shot. Yes, we are going to clean up this nation, and we'll start with the long hairs.
I saw her shot, and I saw her die. After you see one of your friends die in front of you, you are bound to change. What is wrong with America?
I believe students ought to be very careful. If you're shocked, you shouldn't complain about the reaction.
What is wrong, America?
Would have been better if the guards had shot the whole lot of them that morning.
We feel that the guard did exactly what they are sent in to do, to keep the law and order.
The imperialistic aggressor, the United States, has finally turned on its own. The bourgeois system is corrupt and now killing its own kind. The Kent State 4 died for the proletariat.
Unite against capitalist oppression. Revolution!
Authority, law, and order are the backbone of our society. Would you want to stand idly by while people threatened your homes? Well, Kent State is my home. My taxes fund it.
They are our martyrs.
They were all communists.
Raise up flowers against the common evil enemy. Blow together on all the dandelions in the world.
Jerry Rubin said right on campus, get a gun and shoot your parent.
My children will never see your cesspool of liberalism. Go to Cuba, hippies. This is America. And our blood is red.
The shit is gonna go down now, man. This country is gonna pay. The revolution's on. Power to the people. Stick to pigs.
There's no reason to grieve over those deaths. Why, one girl was so riddled with syphilis that she would have been dead in 2 weeks.
Flowers gather for war. Stuff the hypocrites with your earthy roots.
They're gonna have to find out what law and order's all about.
Allison Krauss, you placed a flower in the barrel of a guardsman's gun.
America. Love it or leave it.
Change it or lose it.
Kent, the thorny flower of protest.
Can you believe it? It's so hard for me to accept this. I mean, I knew America was screwed up, but I think all it comes down to is change. America can't face it. We were wrong in Nam. What did it get us? There's no real purpose or reason for us to go invading another country and telling them what to do. Why can't they understand that? Hell, but can you imagine Nixon or Spiro understanding anything? Can you imagine them understanding the beauty of making love? Can you imagine them? Can you imagine them under this? I'm so sorry. The beauty of being free to make your life what you want it? Hell no. They were too much into the game, too much into their Super Bowl of sorts. You know the kind. The one where the final score is already decided. Hell, we didn't even know we were in the Coliseum. But then, that too was the plan, wasn't it? Move the pawns at will, get them before they even know they've been got. Just line up your side and play the game. As if you don't already know the score until the blast of the shots. Left goes on for some. Left goes on for the winners, but the strongest went out. I'm the last one to say I had it all together. But I do know I had it more. I do know I was more with it than Nixon or Agnew. Two dudes who really had it together were the Kennedys. Bright, young, together, and caring about people. Yeah, I mean, they like to play too, but somehow they seem to lead the crowd, you know? Not to play into their fears and cries for blood, but, you know, they seem to run too fast and hit the line too hard. The horn blew too soon for the Kennedys, much like us. Funny things is no one realized their game was fixed too. People should start wondering, you know, who makes the rules, who calls the shots, because if you call them, you win. It seems weird that America's supposed to be beyond all the violence, you know, democracy and all that. But then Nixon up and says he will in no way be affected by any demonstrations against the war. What does that leave the people to do if the president says he won't listen? Some kids were mad as hell, and I don't blame them. They were protesting the war that Nixon said he would end in the first place. No one realized they were heading right into a trap. We didn't know they were hungry for a showdown. They found proof that the White House was craving a confrontation to show students who was boss, to discredit the anti-war movement, and that President Nixon was ready with overwhelming mobility, manpower, and firepower to crush the students. Asshole. Didn't fathom it would come to this. People should make up their own minds. Let the Vietnamese decide their own future. Let you decide yours. Didn't I feel America had an obligation to keep Vietnam free? Tell me, am I free? My buddy down the street, he went to Vietnam and came home in a box. Is he free? It hurts like hell to think about him dying in some hot and sweaty jungle there. Completely free. Completely free from all his friends and so far away from home. Why don't we use that force stronger than any weapon and more powerful than any leader? Man, this is what they were saying then. Love one another. Let people do their own thing. Woodstock. Hey, it showed how a nation could be together in harmony. Not playing to win, but playing to help each other. No Coliseum. Hell, I'm tired of this. Ask Allison.
Well, the new lifestyle almost tore me apart from my family. My dad and I were a lot alike, and we're close, but our fights were something. They were intense. Most were about my belief that love is worth sharing. I loved Barry, and we lived together in Kent with my cat Yossarian. Dad didn't understand it, but Prof. Lunan at Kent helped me understand where my dad was coming from, at least. It was like a difference in generations, and I can't keep quiet about anything, so I couldn't just stand around and not do anything about what was wrong. I was active in Kennedy's campaign. Damn it, look where it got him, and me. I marched at the moratorium at Kent. What good did that do? Nixon is a fascist who didn't listen to the people. He was the president of the United States, and he told the press before that students were bums. Where was the moral leadership? You know, they're keeping the 1,000-page FBI summary on the ROTC fire under wraps. You know, the fire that allowed the Guard onto Kent State's campuses in the first place? They're keeping it all under wraps at the archives. If it got out, and you knew what really happened, it would blow sky high. Doesn't it seem funny that the Guard was on the way to campus before the fire started? They responded to a fire before the ROTC building was burning. But the local cops and firemen didn't respond until after the fire actually started. The fire didn't actually start until after kids had left the area. So who really set the ROTC building on fire then? Why not release the FBI report? Is there something they don't want you to see? Why did the Guard come to campus on Saturday night? Why were trigger-happy, tired guards who had been shot at by the Teamsters brought to Kent when a fresh unit was available? Why did Nixon call the Guard and tell them to make a goddamn good example of someone at Kent? Why? Because we are that example. If Nixon and Agnew were middle of the road, then I am a radical and I am proud of it. I can't deal with murderers. Nixon promised to end the war in Vietnam. The Kennedys would have. McCarthy was gypped out of a nomination. Humphrey, but that's all part of it. I don't understand why winning is always the bottom line. At Kent, I finally turned to my friends and turned on to my classes.
The whole thing makes no sense to me. I've never been able to understand it. I hated politics and was only thinking about the speech path test. I walked around Taylor Hall on my way to the test, and it would have been nice to just grow up, to grow old. I know I wasn't going to set the world on fire. I'm not a strong person. I almost passed out when I gave blood. But I can't move on until...
Sandy, remember the good things. Remember when you woke up the whole house, let everybody outside into the snow? They thought there was a fire, and you told them they were going to get a moon tan. You know, after the Lauderdale trip, remember our times together then? Remember our painting?
Jeff, all I can remember is I want others to remember too. I saw the Guard leave and go back up the hill. I walked the other way. The guards were walking towards the Commons. I walked with Sharon, and then I heard...
I know where you're at, Sandy. I have a hard time letting go too, because...
The guards said they were surrounded. They were forced to fire.
None of us were within 300 yards.
Look, the FBI set the record straight.
That self-defense crap by the Guard
Was fabricated subsequent to the event.
Look, even in 1970, Nixon's own commission said the Guard lied.
Tell them about the memo.
Yeah, the memo.
A secret memo that tells who called the shot?
In a secret memo made public by NBC on April 1978,
Richard Nixon told Attorney General John Mitchell in August 1970, prior to any official findings on the shooting, quote, "There will be no official investigation on the incident at Kent State."
That about saying it all for Mr. Law and Order.
Yeah, there would be order, but little concern for law. For all of you who don't want to know it, Kent State is not history. It's tomorrow. Let's go on.
I want to go on, but I can't. I can't because of... I still worry about people. My mother, we were so close. We were so close and she never got to see me again. She knew me better than anyone else, and I know she and Pop know that I wasn't there making waves. I would be the last person you'd expect to see there. ROTC commitment to serve only KSU for 8 months. Before that, I was at Colorado studying geology, but decided it was too far away from my friends and Ohio, so I came to Kent to study psych and enjoy life. I'm not a square, but I'm not a freak either. I like the Rolling Stones and my Fiat and these orange bell-bottom pants, but that's not what is important now. I still worry about her. I know I need to, but I still can't go on. I've always been fascinated by American history. I used to be an Eagle Scout, and at camp we would reenact all the important parts of our past. I really got into that, but one thing that always bothered me was the wars. You see, I was really infatuated with General Custer and all the wars. The Indian Wars, the Civil War, WW1, WWII, the Korean conflict, and now Vietnam. I know I'm an ROTC, but that doesn't mean that I am pro-war. I'm sure not a flower child, but now I'm really thinking that my ROTC decision might not have been such a wise move. I really can't understand our involvement there, but I need the money that the scholarship provides, and besides, it would hurt my mother if I dropped out of ROTC. She's really patriotic. I had heard they might burn down the ROTC building, but I really didn't believe it. I mean, that type of violent reaction isn't going to change anything. It just pisses more people off. You can't just go around burning things up that you don't like. You know, everybody should realize that violence has never really solved anything. Santayana said, "Those who cannot remember history are condemned to repeat it."
13 seconds.
61 rounds.
Those who do not, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Those who cannot remember history are doomed to repeat it.
We live. We live. No, we try to live. Each passing second, minute, month, year, we try to live. Constantly fighting, constantly fleeing, constantly surviving, but never stopping. No, never trying to stop. Why? Why? To create dreams that don't exist anymore, to create realities that don't hurt anymore, to create truths that don't lie anymore. Our thoughts hold power, the power we carry through all the smiles and the disdains, the power we carry through all the grins and the surprises, the power we carry through. The power we carry through to just live. Thank you.
Look, but don't touch. Wow, I love your hair. It's so long and luscious. Thanks. I grew it myself. So exotic looking. Thank you? How did you get it so curly? I take a shower and let the warm water run through my hair, sometimes moisturizing with some deep conditioner. Nothing crazy. It's so poofy like a pillow. Can I lay on it? Can I give you the dirtiest look you've ever seen? That curl hanging by your right shoulder is my favorite. My curls aren't like pretty leaves on trees. You should just give me your hair so I can use it as a weave. If that was supposed to be a joke, I don't find it very funny. Is your hair real? Is grass green? Can I touch it? Yes, I know my dark brown, curly, coiled, luscious hair may dazzle you. But to answer the million-dollar question, look, but please don't touch. Thank you.
Love me, my country. A black man, just a buck, digging up obscure truths, solely a spade. Aching pains, but that don't help my case. Take the blues away and set a beam across my face. I'm forlorn, my hands rough and worn. My only sin is my black skin. Dixie winds blow and the southern sun sets. Crows fester and settle. Fatigue burdens my mind and sits atop it like the sweet melon on a rind.
6. Called to action to stop the careless killings of those so far from home. Protesters asking for peace, in turn called bums. The guard is called to police the rally. One would think a body whose intent is to guard the nation would uphold that promise. The words protect and serve should have meaning. A shield is supposed to guard their ward. What can anyone do when their shield attacks? When the wall of faceless men burn their bloodlust into a faceless crowd, something is going to stay. The faceless will be given names. 6, names that are here without their warrant nor consent, without their dreams or ambitions, without the satisfaction of seeing their desires come to fruition. They were given names that will last forever, and not because they wanted it. No, they asked for peace, for a hand, and all they were given was a shovel. Philip Gibbs, James Green, Alison Krauss, Jeffrey Miller, Sandra Schur, William Schroeder.
What is left unsaid. Protesters opt for peace in the face of soldiers with loaded guns. Quick flashes of running, tear gas chasing bodies across the green fields around Kent State University. I see sepia-stained sidewalks that will later be borrowed from to make 4 gravestones. Tears and drum-splitting shrieks. There are voices calling for peace, now begging for help, only to be ignored. Left behind to endure the echoes of fired bullets hitting trees and taking lives. I hear the shots and wonder how many were made in the name of self-defense. Isn't it ironic how it's always those with the guns claiming to be under threat? Now we're in Mississippi, on the road between Jackson State University and the white suburban dream. They call it Lynch Street, and somewhere here lies the memorial for 2 innocent lives taken by the police. Another battle ending in civilian blood. More shots fired by people sent to keep the peace. The grounds of education have always been makeshift battlefields. But when bullets pierce voices calling for peace, when murder is committed in the name of conspiracies, we are no longer looking at democracy. All of these nightmares are far too regular to be considered coincidences. And yet there are screams telling us to sit down, shut up, that the violence started with them, that the victims pulled the triggers. Somewhere the devil is making his bed and writing his will. He knows there is something much more sinister coming to light now. Father, why is it when one asks for peace, they are considered a threat? Hey, Uncle Sam, how much of the blood on your hands came from those you swore to protect? Thank you.
In the spring of 1970, protests dominated campuses across the U.S. as the war in Vietnam brought the invasion of Cambodia and the push for social justice expanded. the deaths of 4 Kent State University students at the hands of an Ohio National Guardsman on May 4, 1970, only served to galvanize such efforts. Against this backdrop, and historically overshadowed by it, was the Jackson State College shooting. Tension on campus had been mounting for some time, not from the Vietnam, but from something much closer to home, racism, which frequently was played out on Lynch Street, a major thoroughfare dividing campus and used by white motorists. On May 13th, students amassed on Lynch Street, wanting their concerns to be heard. Law enforcement were called in without incident. The following day, students and others in the neighborhood gathered. Rioting began about 9:30 p.m., sparked by a combination of tension between white motorists, police, and students. The Jackson Fire Department responded and then called city police, who were joined by state troopers. The National Guard, present from the prior day, remained on the west end of Lynch Street. They had weapons but no ammunition. After the fires from the rioting were extinguished, some 75 heavy armed officers marched toward Alexander Hall, a women's dormitory, with a crowd of about 100 students in front of them. Accounts describing what ensued are varied. Some say officers opened fire without warning. Officers claim there was a sniper in the dormitory, yet others say the sound of a breaking bottle set off the gunfire. What cannot be disputed is the aftermath. The shooting started at 12:05 a.m. on May 15th and continued for about 30 seconds. At least 140 shots came from shotguns, a distance of 30 to 50 feet. Every window on the narrow side of the building facing Lynch Street was shattered. Students scattered, some running for the trees in front of the library, but most scrambling for the doors of Alexander Hall West. A few students were trampled. Others, wounded, were dragged inside or left moaning in the grass. When the gunfire ended, Philip Lafayette Gibbs, 21, a pre-law major with a wife, a child, and a baby on the way, lay dead 50 feet east of the door. He had been hit 4 times. Across the street, behind the line of police and highway patrolmen, James Earl Green, 17, was sprawled in front of B.F. Roberts' dining hall. Green, a senior at Jim Hill High School, had stopped to watch the action on his way home from work at a grocery store. He had been hit once in the chest. Police later claimed he had taken fire from the direction of B.F. Roberts Hall. 12 others, all students, were struck by gunfire. 7 students required treatment for shock and injuries from shattered glass. Those taken to local hospitals included Fonzie Coleman, Twain Davis, Clemmy Johnson, Leroy Kenter, Gloria Mayhorn, Andrea Reese, Patricia Ann Sanders, Stella Spinks, Lindsey Thompson, Vernon Steve Wakely, Fred Wilson Jr., Willie Woodard, Gladys Dinkins Johnson, and Gayla Porter. There were no arrests in connections with the slayings, and the FBI found no evidence of a sniper. The President's Commission on Campus Unrest found police action unreasonable, unjustified overreaction, end quote. Today, the area of the shooting is known as the Gibbs Green Pedestrian Walkway, a popular gathering place for students and the site of many activities. It is located on the eastern side of campus, bordering John R. Lynch Street, named after Mississippi's first black congressman. It further links Alexander Hall to the University Green. A monument in front of Alexander Hall also honors the 2 young men. Bullet holes in the facade of Alexander Hall remain visible today.
A big round of applause to our poets and our presenters of the play. Thank you all so very much. And just a quick plug for the Southwick. November 1st is the next one, and it's about Edgar Allan Poe. So we hope to see you there. As for tonight, it's been a wonderful memorial, and we appreciate very much your participation and your attendance. And thank you so much for coming. Get back to where you're going safely. Thank you.